This is my 2009 Range Rover Supercharged, and I've had a whining sound develop, and so I'm in the process of diagnosing where this is coming from. At first I thought it might be the Supercharger going out. It could also be the alternator. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm removing two bolts that hold in the cabin air filter housing. And I have to actually, it's easier to access and get my engine cover off by removing this first. So this is the process. I'm pulling out these two bolts, and after I do that, I'm going to remove the rubber gasket that runs along the top that seals the edge of the hood. And then we'll be able to remove the two bolts on the engine cover and pop it out. As you can see, it comes out pretty simply, and this is well worth your time because it takes less than 5 minutes to pull this out, and it will save you tons of frustration in trying to pull your engine cover off. One other note here, you will notice that you'll need to take off the cap of your oil, where your oil fill is. Get the engine cover off as well. One other note I should make here is there are actually 4 bolts that hold the engine cover on, 2 in the front that you saw me take off, and there are 2 in the back. However, mine is missing the rear 2 nuts that hold it on. They were never there when I bought the car, and I just realized this. So you don't actually see me take those 2 rear bolts off because it wasn't necessary. So essentially what I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to get access to look at the Supercharger, see what's going on in here. So I'm pulling off all the breather equipment. I have 2 clamps. Loosen the clamp on the center mount,
that's interesting,
and then the clamp on the right side off of the air filter and the map sensor. It's easier to take the center one off first because it's more flexible, the rubber boot, and then the right one. You also notice I removed the breather tube, and you just squeeze the plastic housing in. There are 2, it's oval, and you squeeze the long ends of the oval connection and it just swivels out of the way. So essentially I'm just looking for obvious issues to see if I can see anything wrong. My suspicion is it's not the Supercharger. I really believe it's the alternator, but I just want to make sure. Just want to rule it out. So now that I've looked over things visually, don't see anything obvious wrong, it's time to run the engine again and try and narrow down where that sound is coming from. So essentially I'm just putting the air intake back together so that I can turn the engine on. So basically what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take my mechanic's stethoscope and start trying to narrow down that sound. So the concept behind the mechanic's stethoscope is pretty obvious, just like going to the doctor. It enhances sound. You basically take the end of the rod and you tap it on parts of the engine that you're suspicious of, and it will amplify the noise, and it will help you pinpoint where your whine is coming from. In this case, it's a whine. And you can hear it visibly in the video. And when I touched it on the housing of the alternator, it was obvious that that's where the whine was coming from. And so it's a pretty simple process. And this really helped me pinpoint really quickly what the problem was. So now I'm just pulling codes to see if there's anything obvious in the engine codes. And there wasn't. So this is always something good to do, but it didn't help in this particular case. But again, it's just one of the steps you go through to rule it out. Okay, so it's another day with the Range Rover. This is a 2009 as a reminder. Range Rover 4.2 supercharged engine. And in the last session we did some diagnosing, trying to find out where the whine was coming from. And I've narrowed it down to the alternator. We used a mechanical stethoscope, mechanic stethoscope, I guess we should say, and the noise was coming from the alternator. Plus, I've driven it a couple times, and I left it running one time when I stopped for 15 minutes and got home just fine. But then the next time I got to the tire shop and I forgot, and I turned off the engine, and it sat for another 15 minutes. And when I went to start it, it wouldn't start. So, and that was after it had sat on a battery charger for 5 hours, 6 hours. So I think we can pretty much determine that it is the alternator. So I'm going to show you the quick, I'm not going to call it simple, but fast way of getting to that alternator and pulling it out. I've already ordered a new alternator. It should be here tomorrow. So we're going to start taking things apart since I can't really do much driving with this in the meantime. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove this grill. And actually the first thing I'm going to do is grab my glasses. All right, so on our grill, we've got 3 screws at the top. These are Phillips heads. And I've got a crack here. It looks like I need to use some JB weld on that. Pretty sure it was that way when we bought it. I've never taken this off. And then once we get those off, there will be a couple clips inside here, down on the bottom. So give me just a second and we'll grab a screwdriver. So we went for the screwdriver, but I'm sure you noticed that these are multi-purpose screws. They have a hex head as well as a Phillips insert, so we went for the socket. Alright, I guess I need to find a better way to do this. One-handed is a bit slower than I'm used to working. Alright, with this one, just got to wiggle it a little bit. And this tab right here just slides out of this slot. You've got 2 tabs in the middle that fit over these, and 1 slot that kind of fits into this spot. And then we have the drop-in tab over here on this side. So that was pretty simple, just your 3 screws on the top. We're going to pull out this headlight. And the first time I did this, it was a little daunting. I had to replace a bulb and found out I had to pull out the whole headlight mechanism. But it's pretty simple. We've got a screw here, a screw here. We've got one down here. And if I recall, I believe that's it. So those are Phillips heads. I'm going to get a little bigger Phillips this time. Loosen that one. That one's loose. Let's see what we got down here. Okay, I'm just going to pull those out and we'll be right back. All right, we have all the screws out. Do a little bit of wiggling here. It feels like I'm still attached to something here. Pretty sure I have that screw loose. It's falling out. Gonna grab this screw before I lose it. Okay, now I'm going to bring you around the back here. Got one connector right there. And I've got a detent button right here. Squeeze that baby and slide this out. Came off pretty good. All right, now we have some access area here. So as you can see, unfortunately, I just filled this coolant bottle 2 days ago. We're going to pull out this coolant bottle and see if we can get some of that to drain into the radiator, and if not, we'll have to drain it. I know some people choose not to take it out, but I've replaced these before, and in fact, we're going to replace this one. I have that part coming as well. What happens with these Range Rovers is after so many years, which is usually, well, let's just say when you get 110,000 miles or so, there's a little float inside that works with the sensor and tells you what the coolant level is. And that float hardens over time and loses its ability to float, and it sinks to the bottom. And so you constantly have your warning come up on your dash telling you that your coolant level is full, even though you know you're not. And so that's what's happening here. So we're going to pull this out and check it and put a new one in when we put this back together. But I'll take you through that process. There's just a couple of bolts and then a couple of hoses. So give me just a second to get set up for that. Just seeing if we can relieve any pressure to have our fluid level go down, but we're not so lucky. So I'm going to have to find something to drain this in. My bucket's not going to fit in there, but we'll do a little bit at a time. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to undo those two bolts right down there. So this is held in, this is only held in by those two bolts, and then on the front side it's got, oh, you can see down here, it just slides into a slot on the bottom. So if we undo those two bolts first, then I'll be able to lift up the coolant bottle high enough to get something under it to drain the coolant out. So that's the plan. So see if we can do this while shooting a video. So I just got a long extension on my ratchet, And we're a bit at an angle, but it's not enough to need a universal joint or anything. Good news is they're breaking loose easily. So the second one, there's a hose in the way, so I had to pull that hose out of the way to get my extension in there close enough. So this is interesting. Let me show you this. This is the coolant sensor. It has fallen right out of the bottom of the coolant bottle. Now, I replaced this, so just because it was a $4 fix, I did that before I bought a new coolant bottle. But what's interesting is it just snaps into place, and the fact that it's fallen out, I don't know what that means, but it doesn't matter because I've got a new coolant bottle coming. But very interesting. Anyway, this comes out of the bottom, but this is one of the wires that we would have needed to unhook, is right here off the bottom of the sensor, and it would have been right here. So basically all you're doing is you push up on this spring right here, and then the sensor pops out, or it pops off the sensor. If the sensor was installed, would be a better way to say it. Okay, all right, now that I have those two bolts undone, so what we have here is we have just a protruding prong here that goes down into a hole with a grommet in it, a rubber grommet, and then up here we have the plastic part, the mount of the bottle, just has a slot in it, and it slips over a protrusion, so it should just slide out. But we won't get very far because we've got a couple hoses holding us in place, so we'll kind of finagle with that for a minute. So the coolant bottle came off that easy. It just, like I say, it just slips right off. So we're going to take off this top hose first, right here, and that'll give us a little more wiggle room to lift up the bottle while we undo this bottom clamp down here, right here. So if you've never taken off these hose clamps before,
channel locks are the best tool. I'm sure they make a specialty tool, but channel locks work really well. You just crimp those together and then you slide it down the hose away from the throat of the mount. And what happens is the heat of the coolant will bond the rubber to its mount. And so you just need to take your pliers or your channel locks, whatever you have, and you just want to loose it, rock it back and forth till it's loose, and then you can start working it off. See if I can do this with one hand. You don't want to clamp too tight because you'll keep the hose from coming off. Once you get it started, then you can move your pliers out away from the throat. And it does come off faster than this when you have two hands. And there we go. So there shouldn't be any coolant to drip from this line because this is our feed. This brings the excess coolant back from the radiator and drops it back into the overflow bottle. And since our overflow bottle, top of it is empty, we have no coolant to drain out from the top hole. So the tricky one is going to be down here, as I already showed you. So we're going to do that next. All right, since my space is tight, instead of channel locks, I'm going to try my needle nose and see if they're substantial enough to. This clamp is quite a bit bigger, and it's harder to get a grip on it with these, but yeah, it's a stiff clamp. All right, try the channel locks. Well, that just solidifies the need for the right tool. Okay, now this is going to be tricky because I probably have, I may have more coolant in that bottle than this jug will hold. But nothing. Oh, there goes the compressor. Hang on. All right. So we got the clamp off. Let's loosen the hose. Okay, it's going to slide right off, so let's see if we can keep our bucket underneath us. Here we go. So we'll probably have coolant come out of both the hose and the bottle. So we got to manage that. Okay, we're going to empty the hose first. So I'm plugging up the bottle. And I'm going to run out of room here because my catch basin is horizontal here with not a lot of depth. So All right. Got our hose taken care of. Just set that out of the way. Now we're going to lift our bottle. Should have everything disconnected. Oh, it's going to be close. Okay. Looks like we need a couple more hands here. All right, so we can tilt the bottle now. Oops, lost a couple drops, but not bad. Okay, now can we get the drain bucket out? All right, mission accomplished. So this is all new coolant. So we're gonna reuse this. And remember, we vented the top of the bottle. So that this will drain. It's got lots of little chambers in here. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to work all the coolant out. I guess that's good enough. I'm gonna chuck it anyway. All right, so let me show you, now that we have that out of the way, our sensor. You can see that. So the sensor just pushing this spring right here with your finger, and it just pulls off the sensor, which I'll show you that too. I'm going to tighten up my vent cap and my lid. Turn this upside down. So this is where the sensor snaps in, and it's all in case, so nothing leaks. It reads it through the plastic, but the sensor would be right here. Let's see if it snaps in. See, that snaps in and it's secure, so, oh yeah, it just, I don't know if it's because it was an aftermarket sensor. Let's try something, since we're discarding this anyway. So the sensor would have been right here, and so we're just essentially unplugging the connector from the sensor, which is in the bottle. This is a replaceable part, but on these vehicles, you're wasting your time. It's the float that's inside that's the problem. Okay, now the next thing we got to do is we've got to remove this bracket that holds our coolant bottle, and it's got one bolt. Let's see if I can find it. Well, let's see here. Okay, it's got one bolt mounted flatwise here in the frame. And then typically there's two bolts on the sides, but oh, Well, let's and also this coolant level sensor snaps onto this bracket with a little slide clip. So we're going to see if we can pop that off and get it out of our way. Hopefully it's not too brittle. Feels like it's coming. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. It's just a little slide clip with some spring clips on it, and it connects over the edge. So we've got to remember to hook that back on after we put this bracket back on. So it looks like we've got a number 8 down there again. Okay, and I do see the bolts on the sides, and they're down underneath. Oh yeah, we've got a souvenir shop tail too. Probably from when I replaced that sensor. Okay. I haven't sprayed any PB blaster or any thread loosening material on these. They are a bit rusted, so we'll see how it looks like our number 8. Like I say, it's a bit rusty down there. I must have just had it at a bad angle. Alright, so I'm not going to make you watch all this. I've got this one here and then 2 down here on the sides that are going to be fun to get to. I'm going to loosen those and then I'll bring you back to pull that bracket off. So let me show you this. To get this bolt down here, the easiest way is with one of these. If you don't have a set of these wrenches, they are pretty amazing. I've only actually had use for them 2 or 3 times, and therefore I just bought these at Harbor Freight, so they're affordable. A whole set is affordable, but when you need them, and this fits perfectly because that where that bolt head is, it's recessed back in, and this fits perfectly. It is a number 8. I haven't got to the other side yet, but I'll keep working on this and tune you in a minute. Alright, so on the right side of the bracket, the best tool I found for this was just a box end ratchet wrench. Again, a number 8, and it worked just fine. So basically what I did is I came in from the front right here, get my hands around through here with the ratchet, and it was actually pretty simple. So you just have to be patient, and it does come out. Not difficult, it just takes a few minutes. So here's our bracket. I have seen some of them are slotted here, but not this one. If it was slotted, you just had to loosen those bolts. Might be something to think of before I put it back on, because make it a lot easier. Then I could screw my bolts in without the bracket being in the way, and then just tighten them. But oh, and the other thing is the tops look pretty rusty, like if you see the rust on this. But the threads were not rusted at all. In fact, they appear to be, I don't know what material they are, but they weren't rusted, so they came out pretty easy. All right, So if you really wanted to make the job of getting the alternator out simple, you would take off this radiator hose here, which comes down to here. And if you get this whole tree out of the way right here, some more light so you can see. If you get this whole tree out of the way, it would be a lot simpler project, but I'm not going to do that. We're going to try and wheel it through that hole down there. So I think we have everything out of the way. We're ready to start undoing bolts on the alternator. We can actually release the tension spring on the belt without removing the fan shroud or the fan. I think I have to take my air cooler assembly off, but we'll show you that. But I'm going to pause for a minute and look that over, and we'll get back to you. All right, I decided we're going to go ahead and get the air intake manifold off. I'm going to take back everything I said about odd sized bolts on these Range Rovers because I forgot that the heads on both of these are number 7. And this is pretty simple. Just got to loosen these up. I like to give them plenty of slack on these clamps so that don't have any resistance. And when it comes time to put them back on, you just want to make sure that the tail of the clamp doesn't go past your corkscrew. So there's one. All right, now this one's a rubber boot. This one's more plastic. So I like to take the rubber one off first because it's more pliable. And then this one will just pop right off. Oh yeah, and we have a breather hose. I forgot. One breather hose right here. And I should have taken it off before I had tension on it. Just squeeze on the high part. And it pops right off. There we go. I just had it on a bind, and then you can swivel that out of the way. Okay, now we can get to our tensioner on our belt. And all these hoses we can just tie up out of the way so we can get down in here with our breaker bar. Okay, well, I'm taking my own advice. I pulled that bracket out, the coolant bottle bracket, and I was talking about the slits. And I looked it over, and I have several inches to be able to slide the bracket forward after I take out the top bolt. So that means if I put slots in going towards the front of the car, that would allow me to just loosen those 2 side bolts, slide the bracket forward, and lift it out. I don't have to take the bolts all the way out next time, or whoever happens to own it. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, that just saved us 20 minutes. Probably half hour putting it back on and taking it off. Okay, so now we're ready to next step. Number one, before we start working on anything electrical, we're going to disconnect the battery, at least the negative. Then we're going to loosen the belt on the alternator, and then we'll start pulling bolts out of the alternator. So we're just about there. So this, if I recall, takes a number 10 socket. And with the negative cable on these, just loosen it enough to, you can see that the terminal is moving. The clamp, the terminal clamp. And sometimes you have to get a screwdriver under there to pop it up. But then I just coil it down and tuck it down the side of the battery here. And there's enough tension, it just stays there. So now we have deactivated our system. So we've reduced the problem of spark or anything like that. So now we'll get a bar on our tensioner. I don't know if I'll be able to show much of that because it's down in there, but we'll see what we can do. So to release our tension on our belt, see if I can get a view down here. There's a tensioner, and again I'm on the 4.2 with the Supercharger. There's a tensioner on the right side of the engine as you're facing it. Not to be confused with the left side of the engine. But as you're working on it, let's see if we can, so much to see down here. So here I'm looking at the engine, and it's right down here towards the top of the engine. Wish I had a smaller light. Guess that's going to have to be one of our purchases, but anyway, that shiny that you see right here, that's the top of the tensioner, and it just takes a 3/8 inch square head like is on the end of your socket. So you can use a breaker bar or whatever tool you can get in there. I just happen to have a flexible it's a flexible ended long handled ratchet. My breaker bar was not, well, flexible enough. I needed to get past all these hoses, and again, mind you, this is the don't take off the shroud and the fan and all of that procedure. We're taking the shortcut. So it does take a little more ingenuity to get around the hoses and such, but it can be done. So I've got that tool with a pipe on the end of it to give me a little more flexion or torque. And basically what we want to do is we want to move that torsioner to the left when you're looking at the engine. That releases the tension. So let's see if we can get this to cooperate here. Okay, yep, it's moving. So now we come back over here. Oh yeah. So down here, gonna have to get a tripod for you. Hang on. All right, let's see if we can get this off. If my hand gets in the way during this, but we'll do our best here. So I've got a hold of the belt, pulling the tensioner, and all we need to do is just slip the belt out of the way, and it's off. Now I'm leaving my bar, my breaker bar, or my ratchet on the tensioner, because without the belt on it, it wants to go clear over to the right. So I'm just going to leave it in place so it's ready to go when I put the belt back on. So the belt's out of the way. Our next part is to pull 3 bolts out of that alternator. I'm going to just tuck this belt out of the way here. We don't want to have to reinvent the wheel with our belt positioning, because we have not taken off our fan shroud and our fan. We can't easily get to it. All right, so now get some light on this. Okay. So the top bolt is right here, and then there will be 2 bolts underneath. And let me double check on the size. I believe it's 14, but I've been wrong this whole project, haven't I? There was a time when I worked on these Land Rovers quite regularly, and I could accurately know the sizes, but it's been a while. Okay, it's a 13, another one of those odd sizes that I said rarely happens. So I'm going to see if my air ratchet still works. All right, here we go. Got the air ratchet. Close your ears for a minute. But you know what? Don't have enough torque. All right. Let's see if we can. Sometimes this is easier from underneath, but since we don't have a lift, this is how we're doing it. Oh, well, that didn't take much. Can't believe my air couldn't handle that. There we go. Oh, that's why we were at the bottom of the air tank. All right, before I pull that all the way out, we're gonna pull out the 2 bottom ones now. All right, we are underneath the car now. Here's our alternator, and those 2 bolts are the ones we're going to pull out. Basically going to use just an extension with a universal swivel joint on the end. And I'll just drive those out. I'm not going to show you because there's just no way to set up the phone under here while I do that, so I'll be back as soon as I pull those out. Alright, so air ratchet didn't do it, and I was able to get my impact wrench in there. I got this long extension with a universal swivel joint on the end, and we got the first bolt popped out. So now I'm going to work on the second one. Alright, since I had to get underneath, I have jacked up the vehicle. We've got our jack stand underneath, and now I've got some clearance to work with. So the second bolt, there we go. Second bolt's a little further up, so we're gonna just had to rearrange my angle a little bit, which is why I had to get more room under here. So I'm going to come straight up past the frame, and I think we should get a good enough bite on it from there. So now I've got room for my impact wrench, and we'll just whip that off. Okay, that one was easy peasy. So now we'll go back up top, and next thing we've got to unclip our wiring, and then we have our battery cable. I believe I pointed this out before, but you can certainly disconnect your coolant line here, and then here at the top of the radiator, and pull this whole manifold out of the way. But I'm hoping this is just going to go quick and easy, so I have just zip tied my lines out of the way here. I've got a little kink. It should be short-lived. And then I've also moved this AC line to the left about 1.5 inches as far as it'll go. So that should give me enough room to get the alternator out of the hole without too much trouble. We'll find out. So now I'm about to turn the alternator sideways so I can get to the 2 wire connections. Alright, I got the electrical connector out. Hopefully you don't have the same problem I do. It was so brittle that when I pressed on the release tab, it broke. So we're going to have to look into solutions for that, whether it's a zip tie or what. And see that. Let's see if we can get that over here. It broke right off here. So the other thing is, at least on this vehicle, they had the positive battery cable that was coming back down from the battery box along this side wall, and then it was nylon tied to the battery cable on the alternator, so I couldn't see that, and it made it very difficult to move the alternator. Once I clipped off that nylon tie, it freed up the alternator and it dropped right out of place, and that's how I was able to undo the electrical clip. So now what we need to do is just twist it enough to, don't know if I can do that while I film it or not, but we just have to twist it so that we have our battery cable on the top side so that we can undo that nut. So let me try that with 2 hands and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, and again, same thing with the rubber boot over the battery terminal cable. It's just so stiff down there that I didn't want to tear anything else or have anything else break, so I just bent back the cover part of the boot and zip tied it to the cable rather than trying to slide it or pill it down the cable. So now we're just ready to get a wrench in there and pull that off. So I still had all my extensions on my impact wrench, so I just used that to zip this off. Came right off, no problem. You can see there's no corrosion on that. Looks like a copper stud. So also notice the orientation of the battery cable. It has little tabs on the sides that make sure when you put this back together that you get those in the right place so you don't break that bushing or that insulator. I'm not sure what that is. So I'm just going to pull that out, and then we'll try and wrangle that thing out of our hole. Alright, we're going to try and pull that out. Piece of cake. Just gotta rotate it around as you come to get around your hoses. And there she is. So our biggest challenge now is how we're going to get that connector to stick in here. So number one, I can see if they make a pigtail to plug in there, and I can zip tie the pigtail, a replacement pigtail. I don't want to replace the connector because it'd be almost impossible to get in there and reconnect those wires. So the other idea is just to try and zip tie the existing one to the housing of the new starter somehow. So I'll have to play with that and see what we can do, but it's out. So installation is just the reverse of everything we've done. I may bring you back in as I figure out what I'm going to do with that connector. But other than that, we're going to call this successful, even though we still have to put the old one in, or the new one back in. So you may recall that when we took the grill off, we had this tab that was broken. So while we're waiting for the alternator to get here, it got delayed, of course. We're going to go ahead and just pull this off and see if we can fix it. I have been using JB Weld for a number of years, and it's an amazing product. And in fact, on my other Rover, I had a tab break off my shroud, a mounting tab off my fan shroud down at the bottom on the side, and I pulled that out and fabricated an aluminum tab, and I glued it on with JB Weld to the plastic shroud, and it's been 3 years now. It's still on there. So pretty amazing stuff. So we're just going to come over here, and number one, let's make sure that you got a good fit. Oh yeah, it's going to snap in there just fine. Okay, so I'm going to set up my tripod and I'll just walk you through this process. Not a big deal, but I thought I would show it for those who haven't used a product like this before. Alright, so this is interesting. You notice on the old alternator, my little connection tabs are on the outside of the alternator. You can see my 3 leads or prongs are closer to the edge here on the tab side. On the new one, I don't know if it was on purpose or by accident, but they've got it flipped. And I can only assume the electrical connection will be the same if I flip my cord to match that tab. But fortunately on this new one, we have this little protection housing around the outside. On the old one, it's all one piece. But on this one, it's open in the back. So I can wrap a zip tie around here. I'm going to drill a couple of holes through the connector, see if I can create a channel to run a zip tie through and secure that in. So that's our quick fix. So we're going to drill a couple of holes real quick. See if I can get a drill back in there. The lead's not very long. So the only tool I could get in there was my Dremel, which actually was fine because it was much easier. And you can see what I did. I just carved a little groove in the back of that wire connector. So now I can slide that zip tie through. It will go through the outside housing of the alternator. And hopefully this should be able to cinch it in really good. And it should last at least as long as that tab did on the connector originally. So let's hope this is a quick and inexpensive fix. And we're gonna get this thing connected. So I'm slowly cinching this nut down, trying to seat those tabs in the plastic. I had to squeeze it in a little bit with pliers because it was a little wider than would fit in the holes. I think I have it. I started with a ratchet box wrench, but that boot is in the way enough that now I'm using a regular open-end wrench, and I'm just snugging a little bit of time till I get those tabs seated, and then we'll snug it up. All right, I don't know if you'll be able to see this or not, but we're going to run this tie through the housing. And then got to be able to get my hands in there, get that connector. I can say I'm probably in the way here, but let me get that through the connector and then I'll bring you back in, hopefully. All right, I'm going to try and show you this. Sorry for the shaky camera work, but I've got the nylon tie here going through the housing, and then it's looped through the hole I drilled right there in the connector. So when I plug that connector in, that wire tie should just travel along the top of the connector. Once I get it all the way in place, then I will just cinch down the zip tie. And it should hold it in place and replace that broken tab. So I'm going to pull the camera out and do that, and then I'll show you the end result. You know what they say about the best laid plans. So it was working perfectly until I was reminded how brittle that connector was to start with. Cinched down my zip tie, and the edge of my connector that I was clamped around just broke right off. So we're doing a latch stitch repair. I'm going to put a dab of JB Weld in the end of that connector and try and glue the zip tie right into the connector. And that's it. That's all I'm saying. I do want to clarify here. Obviously, if I was working on somebody else's vehicle, we would get a new connector of some sort and do it right, but this is my own, and I'm willing to take the risk of jamming that connector in there with a little bit of help, should we say. So if this happens to you, do what you think will work best for your situation. Hey, we're back at the end of this video for our alternator replacement on the Range Rover Supercharged. I just want to report everything went back together as it should. A lot easier to put it together than it was to take apart, so that was good. So I just wanted to give you a final update as I got the alternator in and had been charging the battery, and it turned out that the battery was still not working. So I pulled the battery out and took it back to Walmart. I've been experimenting, and I'll just tell you about this. I've been experimenting with batteries, and I've always been an interstate battery fan. And I started researching and found out that about 4 of the major batteries on the market, all from different places like AutoZone, Interstate, and Walmart. Those batteries are all made by Johnson Controls. They come out of the same factory. And so I thought, why not experiment with these Walmart batteries? Because they're a lot cheaper and the warranty is actually better. It was a 1-year longer warranty. So short version of that story is that I pulled the battery out and took it back to Walmart. It was 2 years old. They tested it and it was completely fried. So they replaced it 100% under warranty. Have the new battery in. This thing runs like a champ. So right back here we have our brand new, and I've also the last few years switched to the AGM batteries, and jury's still out. Like I say, this one didn't last too long, and I don't know if it's because it's the matte battery, gel matte battery, or if it was just coincidence. But we've got the new one in, 4-year warranty. And oh yeah, and I did, as I mentioned in the video, I've replaced got a brand new coolant bottle in there, and to solve that low coolant message I was getting. So just need to throw the engine cover on, put my cabin filter housing back in. So that's a 15-minute project. Put that back together and we're ready to go. So thanks for joining us on this video. I know it's a bit long, but I wanted to make this detailed for those of you who are doing it for the first time. I hope you appreciate the detail. So keep on trucking.